We're getting started?
Yeah, Christoph, go ahead.
All right, fantastic. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Ohio University's Athlete in Action. My name is Christoph, and I am a sophomore on the football team here at OU. Before we get started, I'd like to say on behalf of the Bobcats that we are so glad that you guys are here with us tonight. Just so you guys know, we will be here every Monday night from 7:30 to 8:30 Eastern Time throughout the entire summer. We want you guys to hop on and keep coming, as we would love and we want to keep building the community and grow closer with God with you guys. If you are new to Athletes in Action, let me give you a quick introduction. Athletes in Action is an international Christian sports ministry. Our goal and mission is to encourage and build spiritual movements and communities through the platform of sports, as everyone can grow and know someone that truly follows and loves Jesus. Along with that, our vision is to see a day when there is Christ follower on every team in every sport in every nation. Now, without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton off to our fearless leader, MH.
Hey, gang. Can you hear me? I am glad that you guys are here tonight. We're here because of the events that are taking place in our nation right now. And a few days ago, I watched the brutal, senseless taking of life of George Floyd, and it disturbed me greatly. And so it caused me to pause and think, what can we do as the body of Christ to bring healing, to provide some solutions, to encourage people, and to live out the faith that God has given to us. And so I've invited Chris Rogers, our former director of football of operations, and his wife Kelsey to join us, and they're going to share some of their personal experiences of the journey that they've been on. And then Pastor Leon is going to share some insights from God's word to encourage us as we seek to provide healing and to help us in this endeavor of these issues that we're facing at this time. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Chris and Kelsey. Glad you guys could join us tonight.
All right, thanks for having us. As I am sure you guys can tell now, we are having technical difficulties. This is my first time doing Zoom on my computer, and apparently my camera doesn't work, nor does my audio work, so we are calling in so you can hear us, at least. Mark reached out and was talking to us a little bit about, his son. I'm sure all of you that are on this call have met his son, Micah. I was fortunate to meet Micah when he was like 7 months old, way back in yesteryear. But he was just asking me, my thoughts on it and my experiences. So the first thing, a lot of times people talk about systemic racism and, what that means and what that is. And to me, it boils down to always having to fight from behind. No matter what the circumstance is, just feeling like everyone else has a leg up on you and you got to work twice as hard to get just as far. And you have to, you're not afforded the same mess ups, because nobody's perfect, but your mistake can cost you larger when someone else making the same mistake may not. In reference to this specific situation, for me, it's just a constant awareness when I leave the house that I am not necessarily always in control of what may happen. I mean, those of you that have met me, which I think is the majority of people on this line, you guys know me. I'm a kind person. I'm a calm person. The players that are on here know that usually, unless something happens, I don't get upset quickly. But even still, even though that's my nature, visually seeing me, I'm a 6'5" African-American man. So before I even open my mouth, people are making judgments on what I am and who I am before I even say anything. And that's something that I've had to grow up with and learn to navigate. My wife is going to read a post that she wrote and posted to Facebook, and in there it says being afraid, and it's not so much being afraid, but it's just like an ultra awareness of everything that's happening around you, because me not being aware can cause me to have an issue that other people may not face. You know, I told her one time that, you know, anytime I'm in a car, even though I know I'm doing the speed limit or 5 miles over, because I do have a heavy foot and I try my best not to speed, but even still, not doing anything crazy, knowing other cars are driving way faster than me, but if a police car gets behind me, I start getting nervous, because it's like, all right, I know that I have 0 warrants. I have nothing in this car that's illegal, that will cause any issues, but still I get nervous because it's like, I still don't know who the officer is that's going to pull me over. And so my wife and I have been talking the past couple nights, and she said, you know, well, it's tough because now both sides are going into the situation tense to start. The officer is tense because they may have had other encounters with people that aren't me. I'm tense because I don't know whether this is a calm and polite police officer like all of the friends that I had in Athens on the police force, both on the OUPD and Athens Police Department, or if this is somebody who's upset about something that may have happened or an encounter that they had. And so now we're both in the situation. The only difference is that they've got a weapon and I don't, and they are able to use that. And if I do anything, I'm in trouble. So I'm a rambler and I apologize, but for me, it's just being aware, because, and I see Samson on here, and I don't know anyone else's ethnicity on here, but it's just like Samson, I'm not trying to encourage you to live in fear, or anyone else. I'm not telling you to live in fear, because that's not what life is about. Especially as a Christian, God always has you and you're always in God's control. But it's just a matter of being aware, because by not being aware, you're putting your fate into someone else's hands, essentially. And I'll turn over to my wife to read this post, and then I'll pop back in a little later.
Hi guys, my name is Kelsey, and for those of you who don't know me, I am white and my husband is black. So we have a little bit of an interesting dynamic in terms of what we've experienced in terms of racism. And so I have been thinking about this a lot in the past few weeks, and we've been talking about it a lot. And something that was important to me was to kind of try to articulate what I was feeling. So I wrote this post on Facebook, and I want to read it to you guys, and then I just want to cover like 2 quick things that I've learned in this season of life. So it says, I used to always say that I was colorblind. For heaven's sake, I married a black man. My daughter is half black. But as well-intentioned as I was saying that I was colorblind, I realize now that being colorblind is dangerous. I think of my husband as a big teddy bear, an incredible father, a wonderful son, the most amazing husband. Surely nobody would be threatened by him. However, he's also a 6'5" black man. Those who don't know him might decide, based solely on his appearance, that he is intimidating or threatening. I hadn't considered that very much until recently, when I got a very serious educational lesson from the man I love. We recently moved far from the small college town where we essentially grew up. We went to college there and worked there for 6 years. I used to joke that my husband was sort of a celebrity there. He's outgoing and everyone knew him. We couldn't go to the grocery store without having to stop and talk to at least 6 people. Literally, a trip to get a gallon of milk could take an hour, but I felt safe. I very rarely, if ever, thought about the color of his skin. Fast forward, and we now live in a whole new state, all the way across the country. We're working on getting healthier, and my husband goes for a run every day. For a while, he was wearing a head covering, kind of like a hood on a jacket, that covered his ears but not his face, to keep his AirPods in his ears while he ran. I'm ashamed to say that one day I looked out the window and I saw him running, right after Ahmaud Arbery was killed, and something I hadn't really felt before hit me like a blow to the stomach: fear. It was like all of a sudden my entire world shifted. I realized that the man I loved could be unsafe in this world, not because of his head covering or hat or because he was wearing black clothing, but because his skin was black. I panicked. That very day, he came inside from his run, and I said, I need you to not wear that hoodie on your head when you run. And I need you to not wear black clothing when you run. And I need you to stay around here when you run. Embarrassingly, I had decided that I wanted him to look as innocent and friendly as possible, as if a blue shirt instead of a black one would change someone's perception of him. My husband sort of chuckled at my request. I said, I'm serious. We're not in the town where we spent most of our adult lives. We don't know people here. I don't want something terrible to happen to you. My sweet husband looked right at me and said, I don't mean this to be offensive at all, so please don't take it that way. But what you're feeling now, I've felt my whole life. Sure, it wasn't bad where we lived before, but there's always a chance I could get pulled over by a cop I didn't know. It's always in the back of my head when I'm driving. And why do you think I say hi to everyone I see when I'm running? I want them to get to know my face. Why do you think I only run in a square around the block? Our neighbors are used to me. Before this conversation, I was colorblind. I used to think I could deal with racism because it would likely just be heckling from people who didn't like seeing a white woman with a black man. I used to say it's us against the world and we can face whatever racist people throw at us. But it's not us against the world. I want it to be, I really do, but really it's him against the world. I was too naive to think that racism might throw murder at us. It's a lot longer than that, but that's kind of the gist of what I'm talking about. And the thing that I really want to talk about mostly is we as white people have an obligation to take on our own shortcomings in this matter. So I have been married to him for 7.5, almost 8 years. And it took me 7.5 years to even get a glimpse at what that means to be married to a black man. And I really always thought I'm not racist. And I thought that was enough. And that's the thing that's scary to me. I see all these posts and I see all these things on social media about people who are saying I'm not racist or I'm colorblind. And I think the biggest problem with that is it's not enough to treat people equally because they carry a far heavier burden than we do because of the color of their skin. And I think it starts with understanding, at least trying to understand. We'll never understand what it's like to live every day that way. But that was my first revelation in 7.5 years of marriage, that my husband has to think about what he wears when he goes outside. He has to think about where he runs. He has to think about what he's going to teach his son one day if we have a boy, how to not appear menacing, not appear, threatening. And I think that's where the problem really lies in terms of what white people view this problem as. I mean, I always thought racism was a verb. I thought it was an action, like someone would say something to us or someone would do something to him. And I'm realizing now it's like a pronoun. It's a person, it's a thing. And it's like every single day, whether someone is heckling him or whether someone is attacking him for some reason, doesn't really matter, because there's still the back portion of what it's like to live that way, knowing it could happen. And I think people get riled up when these things happen, and that's good. We should have these conversations. But the biggest problem is that we're not having these conversations when things aren't happening. So I guess what I'm saying is it's great if you have Black friends, if you have Black family, and you feel like you're not racist. That's fantastic. But what I would encourage you to do is ask the hard questions and be okay with sounding stupid. And I think that's the thing that really stuck out to me. I felt like I had it figured out after being with him for 15 years. So after that many years, I still didn't have even a glimpse of what it's like to live in fear or in, adjusting your situation. And so I think my biggest point is we need to stop preserving ourselves. We need to stop being afraid to speak out because we might sound silly or we might do the wrong thing. And we need to start asking our friends and our fellow Americans, what can we do? And how can we support you? And how can we understand better what you're going through? And I'm sorry, I'm a rambler too.
I mean, as far as, like she said, as far as what you can do, I think first and foremost, it comes down to, like she said, don't think that you know and you understand, because it's going to be tough for you to understand. Be supportive, and, whatever I feel like athletes already have a leg up on America because you're in a locker room together. Like if you're, especially as Division I athletes, you spend so much time with your teammates. You spend so much time around, like for me, I'm a football player. We had a number of different backgrounds on our team. I mean, currently on the team now, I'm not there, but there's an Australian, there's somebody from the Bahamas, there's somebody from Austria. Field hockey consistently has people from other countries on their team. The volleyball team will have other, like there's, in athletics, you already are doing so much, but how do we spread that globally to have that be something that the nation is doing? And I think it comes down to just being willing, like my wife said, to learn and being open-minded to, okay, because I think a lot of times the frustrating part for me is something happens, myself and the Black community will get upset, and then you see a lot of people saying, well, other people are dying too, or this is happening and that's happening, and it's like, okay, I hear you on that, but this is what's happening every day in my life. Like every day I leave my house and I have concerns on if I'm going to make it back. Anytime I leave the house by myself, I have concerns on if I'm going to make it back. When I go for a walk with my 2-year-old daughter, I have concerns. Like I don't want to not go for the walk because I don't want to hold my daughter back from having a life. But at the same time, I'm like, if the wrong person sees me, I could have an issue. And how do I deal with that? Because now it's me and my 2-year-old daughter. So I have to think and act differently. If it's just me, I can run and be evasive, but my 2-year-old can't keep up with me. So now I have to do something different. You know, those are the things that I think about. And I think people don't, I think when people just try and say, oh, well, this other people are dealing with this too. It's like, well, maybe they are, but let's all try and figure out how we can all deal with these things together and get better. Are there any questions anyone have? I'm pretty sure I went over my time by now.
Chris and Kelsey, we just want to say thank you for taking the time and for being willing to be vulnerable and just kind of share what your experience has been, because I think we're learning more and more how much we don't know that we don't know. And that's on us. And it's time for us to listen and learn. But does anyone want to ask a question of Chris or Kelsey before we move on to Pastor Leon? All right, well, we are going to have an opportunity a little bit later to process and ask questions and share the thoughts that we're having. But we would like to go ahead and have Pastor Leon Forte come and bring his message to us. He has brought us a lot of good truth over the years, and we are grateful that he would take time to be with us tonight. So, Pastor Leon, teach us something.
Well, I'm so grateful that I'm able to speak to this group again. I'm a real seed sower, and I really believe that the ground determines the future of every seed. And I believe that Athletes in Action is a great ground, fertile ground for anybody that has any good seed. You know, this time is a period of a paradigm shifting, but things have to be challenged in a paradigm shifting time. And throughout this time with the pandemic and the time off that we've had, I've considered it a literal gigantic spiritual Selah. Selah is a time of, means literally pause and reflect. When you see that term in Psalms, it literally means not to go any further. Don't collect this next principle until you've paused and reflected on how you arrived where you are, what it is that brought you there, and what it is that you need to receive from being there. So we've been on a Selah, and it's been a time, but in that time, it's allowed me to ask God, what are you doing in this hour? And the events of this weekend are strong events in my life. It took me back to when I was a child, and I asked God for scripture, and God gave me this scripture out of Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 27, And I'm going to read it out of the New Living Translation because it's really clear. And it says, all of creation will be shaken and removed so that only unshakable things will remain. All of creation will be shaken and removed so that only unshakable things will remain. It's important for us. It's important for us to see that, and the verse before this talks about him shaking heaven and earth, that the things that we're battling against are not only earthly things, but they're things that have been erected in the heavens. He says in the book of Ephesians, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. The very first dimension of spiritual warfare is a principality. That's a ruling spirit that hangs over a nation, hangs over a state, hangs over a city, over a community. It's a ruling power. And racism is what we're dealing with in this hour. It's been hanging over the United States, and it's time for our nation to come out of the doldrums, come out of denial that this thing is hanging over the top of us. Now this ruling spirit, what it does is it enforces the inhabitants that it's ruling over and dominating to manifest its characteristics. And it's a characteristic built in fear and intimidation and built in comparisons and superiority and those sorts of things. So the very first thing, God, when I found out that I was going to be speaking to this group, the very first thing the Lord had put on my heart is to make sure that we understand, especially as believers in the church, that God is the author and finisher of our faith. He's the author of this shaking. It's a manifestation of God's ability and God's authority to shake both heavens and the earth, that our steps are ordered by God. Our stops are ordered by God. You're in the earth right now because you're carrying something that the earth needs. That means you're a threat to the principalities that you live under. Every move that has changed this country has been a move since the founding fathers of young people, of people who are dissatisfied with the status quo, and they no longer will tolerate this madness that we call normal. And so God has given us a new normal. The second thing that he wants us to understand is that what this shaking is all about. This shaking is a disruption, a disturbance of our comfort zones. That we've gotten so used to seeing people as second class. And if it's not us, it's foreign people. There's a spirit in the country right now that sees people who are different from us, be them racially or be them ethnically or nationality-wise. If they're not like us, they're our enemy. That's a wrong thing. The Bible says a mixed multitude left Egypt. When God delivered the children of Israel out of Egyptian bondage, the Bible said a mixed multitude left Egypt. There were people from all over the world. Egypt was the United States of its time, and some people saw the move of God, and said, we're going with them. I believe in this hour, people are going to see the move of the church in this hour, but first God had to put us on a timeout. And I'm talking to athletes. And so the fact of the matter is, this is not a 20-second timeout. This is a full timeout. This is a time to re-strategize, not a time just to refresh, but a time to refresh, re-strategize. Let's come with a new strategy because we're not winning the game. And so it's time for the church to wake up and come out of the doldrums. Shakings also test and reveal the condition and the soundness of our foundation. We've got to look at our foundation. Is it really sound? We say one thing, but do we do another? Martin Luther King said that Sunday morning at 11 o'clock is the most segregated hour of our country's timetable. All the whites go over here. All the blacks go over here. All the Hispanics go over here. All the Asians go over here. And we've got to break that kind of madness and become the mixed multitude that left Egypt with all the gifts, skills that would entail. It's God's method of separating, shakings are God's methods of separating wheat from tare. You know, This is a time to see who's for real, who's practicing Christianity, and who is practicing churchianity. We got people who want to practice churchianity. They know more about how to be a good member of their church than to be a good saint that is going to do the things necessary, be the paradigm shifter, the change agent that Jesus was in his hour and time. And this racism keeps us separate. Our strength is in our connectedness. Our strength is in our connectedness. The Bible says it's every part fitly joined together, bringing what every joint supplies, causes growth of the body as it does its share. And so we are not complete. We're, you know, when it says every joint that's fitly joined together, a joint is where two things come together. I'm connected. My ministry is connected to Athletes in Action. And if I don't make the right connection, I miss what Athletes in Action brings to me, and Athletes in Action misses what I bring to it. If I'm sitting here with George, I'm connected to George. If George and I don't have the right connection, then we don't get what each other needs. George might be carrying my healing. I might be carrying George's encouragement. So it's important that we connect well. If that's the case, and I know I'm talking fast, but if that's the case, that literally means that the enemy's best weapon is separation. And so he'll use differences to separate us. He used it in the Garden on Eden. Did God say you will be like God? In other words, he tried to point out the difference, and she was already like God. And so we got to catch the devil while he's trying to punk us and come with this old raggedy game that he's been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. Shakings almost always bring realignments, and we need to be realigned. Listen to this. It's something that I had never heard of. Many of us as brothers and sisters in Christ, we've heard this scripture 1,000 times. But Luke 6:38 says, "Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will God cause men to pour into your bosom." Shaken together. Sometimes shakings can separate wheat from tare because they look just alike. They look wheat and tare. That's why you're not literally not supposed to check wheat from tare until it's harvest season, because they look just alike. But when harvest season comes, the fruit that is on pure wheat will bow that stem down on the ground. It looks like a field of wheat ready for harvest. Looks like it's in a worship position. It's worshiping. But tare, because it's hollow, because it's an imposter, stands up just as proud and in pride as it can, and it stands up, but it's hollow. It has nothing to it. It's simply not the real deal. And so God sometimes uses the shaking to separate. But in here again, he says over here in Luke that I'm going to use shakings to press things together. There's some stuff that can't come together unless they're shaken. Let me tell you something. This corona virus, this COVID-19, what it has done is it's shaken our nation and shaken us together. For the first time, I'll be 67 in June. I lived through the civil rights movement. I lived through Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I lived through Medgar Evers. I lived through the assassination of Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy. I've seen this time before, but this time it's folks in the street. And in this particular time, as I'm looking at this virus has caused us to value one another and see each other as part, and that if you make it, I make it. We're in it together. I can't believe how many times I've seen this and heard this, that we're in it together. For the first time, I like Chris and Kelsey, am in a mixed marriage. I'm in an interracial marriage. My wife is white. I'm black as the Bible that I'm looking at. But the fact of the matter, my wife is white, and so and our children are striped. So the fact of the matter is, when we look at each other for the first time in the small little community that I live in called Nelsonville. When I live in that little community, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. And here's what I want you to hear. for the first time, I have my neighbors coming over saying, I'm going to the grocery store. Do you need a bottle of water? Do you need us to pick up something for you? Do you need coffee? Do you need milk? See, and I do the same thing for them. I have some that are elderly people. Do you need me to pick your medicine up? For the first time, we're interacting. We see each other as equals. We see each other as necessary elements. I'm not complete without them, and they're not complete without me. When I was little, coming up on Sunday, we would go to different people's house after church. Sometimes we would bring the meat, and sometimes we would bring the vegetables. But there would always be a lot of people there, and we would eat together. It's every part fitly joined together, but sometimes it takes a shaking to make us come together. It takes a shaking to make us do what we have to do. 9/11 was a shaking for our nation and brought us together, but we allowed it to come apart. In Revelations, God says that he had this one thing against the church at Ephesus. He says, you know what? You've left your first love. He didn't say you lost it. He said you left it. You walked away from it. You had it at one time, but you walked away from it. We've got to get back to knowing that we need one another and there's value in every one of us. And this racism wants to look at the differences. We never talk about it. One thing I got to say, if you don't face it, you can't fix it. If you don't face it, you can't fix it. I heard Chris talk about being on a athletic team, but that's also entertainment and recreation. But life is not just entertainment and recreation. Yes, we can all come together when we're trying to win. The common bond is a win, but life is survival. And so we need one another. We've got to face it to fix it. I can't fix what I won't face. The second thing is that we got to deal with the two sets of rules. You know, if we've got a rule for whites and a rule for blacks. We got a rule for males and a rule for females. We got a rule for the educated and a set of rules for the uneducated, for the wealthy, for the poor. And so we've got to wake up and smell the coffee and deal with these two sets of rules and face these things and confront those things so we can fix them. Every black father has to have the talk that white fathers don't have to have with their sons. And thus talk, you know, I have never met Chris face to face, but probably Chris has had this talk. I know George has had this talk from his father, and that was this: son, you're getting old enough to drive now. So now if you get pulled over by the police, what you need to do is keep your hand at 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock on the steering wheel. Answer every question with sir. Make sure that they can see you. Get your wallet out so it can be sitting on the dash so you don't have to go in your pocket or anything like that. We have to be told how to deal with the people who are charged with protecting us. White fathers don't have to do that with their sons. My solutions for this, and I'll be done. I know I'm close to my time being finished, but my solutions for this is, number one, redefine the history book. If you don't know your heritage, you cannot walk in your inheritance. If you don't know your heritage, you cannot walk in your inheritance. African Americans people, you know, German people can look back. They can look back and find out where they came from. French people, British people, Dutch people, they can find out where they came from. Asian people can find out where they came from, but African Americans can't always find out where they came from. Do you know that this genealogy.com and these services that try to people find their origin, it causes pain for African Americans when they find out, well, I'm not over here, I'm not over there. They're trying to figure out where they were from, who they're related to. We had a president, a brilliant president, African American, but yet when he tried to find out where he was chastised. You know, we got to deal with this anti-immigrant mindset. Who isn't an immigrant in the United States? We all stole the country, this dumb stuff about I want to take my country back. You stole it in the first place. So the fact of the matter is, we got to get to the place where we restore what we have taken from other people. Finally, we got to recognize we're connected. We're interconnected. We got to embrace these seasons of shakings. Remember and understand God is the author and the finisher of your faith. Two, we've got to trust God's process. Lean not to our own understanding. There's a reason why it's coming up now. There's a reason why 60% of the people that are dying from this virus are African American or people of color. Yet we don't make up but 13% of the population. It would be real easy to walk with frustration that perhaps this thing is designed to get rid of us. So we have a saying in our community: are you looking for justice? Because justice in our community means that when you go to jail, just us are in jail. There's a problem here, and we've got to deal with it. We've got to embrace these seasons, and finally eat a new diet. We've got to eat a new diet. And I suggest a fruit diet, the kind of fruit that's in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, the fruit of the Spirit: patience, long suffering, forgiveness, those sorts of fruits. And then we got to throw a vegetable in there. We need to eat some lettuce. Let us. We're not going to get through this thing by ourselves. We got to let us. I need your help and you need my help. I need what you have to bring. I need with your generation. Listen, if I didn't have the other generation right now, I couldn't be speaking to you because I'm clueless about this whole Zoom thing. But the next generation brought me into the mix. And so we need each other. But like Samuel, when Samuel heard God calling him, he needed to go to old Eli to know what to do. We need one another, and we can't let race get in the way of dealing with us. I appreciate the time that you've given me, and I pray that I haven't talked so fast that somebody thinks that this fool's on some kind of coffee high or something like that. But God bless you, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Pastor Leon. We love it when you're willing to come, bring your wisdom and share with us. And also, Chris and Kelsey, we wanted to take a little bit of time. Normally on a Monday night, we split up into discussion groups, and we kind of time travel into different little group rooms, and we have some discussions, and then we come back together at the end for a little bit of prayer. And tonight we just thought maybe we would take the opportunity to stay together instead of breaking up in groups, and to take a few minutes to ask questions, and I know some people just want to listen, and I think the best posture for us to have right now is that we need to listen, we need to learn, we need to be willing to say, I haven't been doing things the way I should. But we also want to open up the floor and say, this is a safe opportunity for any of us to say the wrong thing, ask the dumb question, do whatever you need to do, so that we can all get off the Zoom call tonight feeling like, okay, I know more. I know more than I did when I got on the call, and I can see more clearly what God is telling me to do as a Christian. I know the vast majority of us on this call are white, and guys, this is our time to step up and set some things right that we've done wrong for a long time. And our Black brothers and sisters have had enough, and it's our time to step up and be with them, because our voices sadly carry weight in places theirs don't sometimes, and it's time to level the playing field. So I'm hopeful that this is a turning point in our nation, and certainly in the ministry of Athletes in Action. We've tried for a very long time to be diverse and to be inclusive and to represent the athletic world, which we know is beautifully diverse. But we need to be super intentional, and there are a lot of people around us hurting, and so this is a time to ask questions. Maybe you're not sure what to do, maybe you're not sure what to say, but we have some people here who will graciously give us their wisdom and their experience. So,
Mindy,
yes.
This is Pastor Leon, and I think it's appropriate to say this right now. Don't think any question that you may ask might be offensive or embarrassing. I would rather you ask the question so that we can answer it, and know that I'm going to answer it, and Chris is going to answer it with love in their heart, because you are reaching out. You're creating the world that my grandchildren are going to live in. But I want to say this principle: whenever God raises up a deliverer, He always raises the deliverer from within the people that he intends to deliver. So if white America is going to change, it's going to take white Americans to understand the situation. You know, when I said rewrite the history book, that's very important. I don't blame white males for feeling superior, for feeling like they have ownership in the nation and they have a purpose to rule and to legislate. Because when they read the history books, they only see their contributions. And so they have this sense, it's only right that they have a sense of ownership and a sense of duty and obligation. And so they can take pride in their contributions, but if no one else's contributions are acknowledged, then you can't have pride in that. And you can't have respect for the other people that help make this country great. Multiculturalism has got to not be a dirty word anymore, but something that we really take pride in. It makes us different from every other nation.
It's open mic now. Anyone can talk.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question of Chris. When you and this is more for all of our athletes, so I'd like you to speak to our athletes when they're in the locker room. Are there things they need to be aware of, or that they can be aware of, or things that they can do to be more intentional, to be more than just a teammate, but to go that step further of helping to be the light of Jesus Christ?
Well, as far as, you know, being the light for Jesus Christ, I would say you have to always walk the walk, and that may sometimes mean doing things differently. One thing that I've talked about when I spoke at AIA before is that I was notorious in college for going out Saturday night, hanging out with my friends until whenever we went home. But then I always made sure that I was up to go to church Sunday morning, but I wasn't really bringing any of my friends along, because to them, I'm the guy that they hang out with. We went out and we hung out. Even if I'm not drinking, like, I'm still out with them till however late. It was always important to me to make sure that I was up, but to them, there was no example that I was really setting, because they didn't see me going to church because they were still sleeping. So just make sure that you are walking the walk and setting the example. And then as far as, you know, being supportive to them, just understand that everyone comes from different backgrounds. Like, there's people, like, speaking to football, because I play football, but I'm sure it's the same for other sports. There's people that come from 2-parent homes. There's people that come from 1-parent homes. There's people that come from really well-off families. There's people that come from families that struggle to make it. I had teammates that were sending half their scholarship check back home to help out because that's what they needed to do. I also had some teammates who their entire scholarship checks went to buying cars and things because they were good. Like, their parents could help them out. Everything that they needed, they had. So just understand that everyone's different. No two people are alike. And if you can embrace the differences and not try and let the differences be what divides you. Some of my best friends are extremely different than I am, but we love each other, and our differences are kind of what we hold on to. Because, I mean, if I'm hanging out with a bunch of people just like me, my jokes aren't that funny. Nobody really likes hearing from me because, I mean, we're all saying the same stuff. So that's what I would say, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Chris. And then I have a question for Pastor Leon. You had mentioned that you have been through, you've seen the gamut from Martin Luther King's assassination, yes, to what we're seeing right now. Can you shed a little bit more light on what white people need to be aware of? I think you did a pretty good job of that, with talking about the history books being written by white men. But can you shed a little bit of light on the past of why systemic racism exists and what white people can do about that? You'd mentioned a few things, Pastor Leon, but if you'd go into a little bit more detail, that'd be great.
You know, one of the important things about the civil rights movement that really struck me when I was a kid coming up was Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner. They were the John Browns of my era. They were the ones who sacrificed their lives in order, because they saw us as one. One thing that if you don't face it, you can't fix it. You know, I listened to Chris talking about the locker room. You know, when I was in when I was in high school, I went to school with 3 All-Americans. In fact, 2 of them played on the team when we lost to the Russians in basketball in the Olympics. And the fact of the matter is, they would talk about, when I would visit them at college, they would talk about how they would have to bring their white friends home so they could see how much they had in common, as well as the differences and the backgrounds that they came from. Some played the sport because it was a sport, and some played because it was the only way that they had out. Another thing is, you can confront racism. Silence is as consent. You know, when you see people being or hearing jokes and the N-word and things that we say about Hispanic people, the things that we say about Asian people in jest, and we say nothing about it, we literally are condoning it. Our silence is as consent. And so there's times when we need to wake up and smell the coffee. One of the things that I love about what I've seen this past weekend is how many white people are out. You know, but at the same time, I want us to look and see there's just as many white looters as they are blacks. But the blacks, in 2 sets of rules, blacks will be the ones that look, they're looters, they're this, and as they've been called terrorists up to this point. And it will be blacks that's being pointed at. But when it comes to whites, this movement will not be worth a quarter unless some white stands up and says, wait a minute, this is not right. This is not the way that we do this. Sometimes silence is as consent. And then the other thing is to see that some things that we look at as race needs to be looked at as economics. For instance, at Hocking College, there are as many inner city African American kids that are going to that school as there are Appalachian white kids. And once they got together, they found out that they had so many things in common. So many come from broken homes. So many come from. We did things where they have on a holiday season, they have to go to 4 and 5 homes to get all their family together. That happens. They have more in common. Jamal and Jim Bob are a team when they come together. And so we've got to see, we've got to see, and whites have to purposely look for other places to display equity. One of the places, the NFL right now, looking for some of these owners need to look for some African American coaches. Whites can get fired 3 different times, and blacks have 1 time and then they're done. 1 time, then they're done. The fastest our justice system works is when a black is taken to jail. My friend and I, same thing. Went to Walmart in Lancaster. dressed after church on a Sunday, dressed in suits. And on our way out the door, we're the only ones that got stopped to see our receipts, to see if we bought what we were supposed to. The white people that were in line with us followed us out to the car to apologize and say, I saw that, that is wrong, I don't agree with that, and I feel for you guys, you shouldn't have had to go through that. And we were grateful just that they saw us. Now, where they fell short was not to go back in and tell the manager, I just witnessed some racism and I don't like it, I don't appreciate it, and I'm going to say something about it, and if you don't do something about this, you'll see me again. When that starts to happen, that can help in many of the situations.
Thanks, Pastor.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question, but first I want to see if anyone else has thought of something they want to ask.
I've got a question. So I kind of want to know, like, what things do you guys notice on a daily or maybe weekly or monthly basis that might reinforce like inequality? And it could be anything, little or big. And obviously we've been finding out about the inequality in terms of dealing with the police, but I want to find out about, you know, other things that maybe white people do that they subconsciously do. They may not realize that might reinforce inequality, that maybe we should become aware of, that you guys are aware of, that maybe we don't know. This is for both Chris and Pastor Leon.
I would say just, you know, at times being followed around the store when my money is just as good as somebody else's, but they are concerned about me taking something, or, I mean, not so much anything that you can do, but just the entire criminal justice system is skewed in one direction versus another. I mean, I would say for yourself, if you find yourself looking at a situation and it involves a black man and you feel like you wouldn't feel that same way if it was a white person, then why are you feeling that way because it's a black person? Like, and there's Wanda Sykes is a comedian, and she said, you know, I was in the store with a friend one time, and she gets a water bottle, and she opens it, and she starts drinking it right away. We haven't even paid for it. And I'm sitting here looking at her like, what are you doing? Because she knows that she can't do that same thing, because she's instantly going to be like, well, are you going to pay for that? The other person had and her friend was a white person, but they had no concern about doing that, because they're like, well, it is what it is. I'll pay for it. And she said, and the lady forgot to pay for it on her way out. No one said anything to the lady. She's like, but I'm worried if they're going to even take this check or think I'm trying to write a bad check. Like, it's just, those are the things. It's like, in every situation, those types of things is what I would say.
Yeah. Just kind of becoming more aware of, like, your thought processes and different situations like that. Okay.
Correct.
I think I also just want to say real quickly, having been with Chris for so long, I think there have been times that I have seen racism in action, and I have not said anything because I wasn't sure, or I wasn't in the moment. I didn't really know what to do. So, like, one time we got pulled over driving at like 2 a.m. from Columbus to Cleveland, and the cop said, whose car is this? And Chris was driving my car and I was in the passenger seat, and he said, it's hers, and I said, it's mine. And they took the registration, and it had my dad's name. My dad owned the car, and they said, this is Dallas's car. And they went back, and it came back and forth, and I had to give them my ID to prove that my name matched. And I mean, Chris had driven my car so many times, but it's something that, like, it's so simple, but it's so, like, and I didn't know what to say because I had never experienced that before, but it's something that really shouldn't have been that big of a deal. And I mean, we've been in situations where we've been, like, at a restaurant and everyone around us is being served and we're not. So I'm like, is this racism? It feels like the only thing different here is the color of his skin, but I haven't said anything because I don't feel confident that that's what's going on, or because I want to pretend it's not. And I think those are the things that I'm most ashamed of. Not that we have to attack it, but that I could have said, hey, is there a reason that like we're the
Mhm.
last ones, or, you know, little things that we could at least bring it to their attention, even if we don't want to fight
Yeah.
it, or even if we don't want to make a huge deal, we could at least say,
Mhm.
have you noticed that we're the only table you haven't served?
Mhm.
Just
Yeah,
a
because I
thought.
mean because I mean in that situation, you know, it could, you know, it could possibly be a legitimate, you know, possibility. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah.
Jake, hey
Yep. Yes,
Jake,
sir. Mhm.
this is Pastor Leon. Look, you know, one time I went to a OU basketball game. Me and one of my buddies that I worked with, and he's white, and so we had some seats way up in the rafters, and there were plenty of seats down low. So I said, you know, man, after halftime, I'm going down there. He said, you think we can do that? I said, yeah, I'm going down there, man. I want to be closer to the action. I want to be able to see better. So we go down, and we're in the seat. Now he's a tall white kid, and he's with me, and we sat down in the seats. Now, right before that, he had watched several other people who were up in our section go down to closer seats. They were white, no problems. But he and I, when we went down, the usher came over to us and said, can I see your ticket stubs? Craig jumped up and looked at him because he recognized that there was a racism problem at that moment. And he said, you know what?
Mhm.
I haven't been black but 5 minutes and I don't like it already. And so when you confront that, and because I didn't say something and Craig did, the man said, well, I guess there's not many. You go in and sit down, guys. Don't worry about it. But if it had been me and another black, or if I would have said something about it, it gets interpreted as that we're aggressive and that we're unruly, and we would have probably got escorted out of there or embarrassed publicly. But when
Mhm.
you say something about it, when you say something about it, let me tell you something, Jake, there's going to be as many little black kids that are going to want to run the ball like Jake does, just like they do for Christian McCaffrey. I see little black kids when they're playing their little ball. McCaffrey got the ball. You know, they're doing that sort of thing. See, they're breaking. You're in a position to break things down, and when you do what you do, it is mind-boggling. Don't you ever think that you don't have power. Sometimes saying something is the greatest power of all, and sometimes not saying something is equally as important. Remember, Jesus sometimes didn't say anything right
Okay.
away. So you got to know that.
Mhm. Yes, sir. All right. Thank you, guys. Yep, that was good.
Great question, Jake. Thank you so much. Pastor Leon and Chris and Kelsey, thank you so much for speaking to us. There's so much here that we need to contemplate, but not just contemplate and be done with it. We need to really take some serious action as to what we can do to be the light of Jesus Christ to those around us, and those that are far away from us. I'm grieving for the families that have been impacted by the recent circumstances, and I'm grieved as I've learned about the ongoing struggle that our African American brothers and sisters experience on a daily basis, even 60 years after the civil rights movement, and on and on and on. And so what I want to do right now is just close in prayer, and then if we're able to stay on for a few minutes longer, for anybody that can stay on for a few minutes longer, if they have more questions. Cody, can you do that, or do you have to hop off?
Nope, we're good.
And then I also want to reference Mindy's Facebook page. She's got a couple of videos on there that help bring a little bit of understanding to the current situation, and I'd like y'all to consider taking a look at that.
Also, just watch our AIA Instagram. And we're going to put some resources up there over the next week that hopefully will help all of us grow and learn.
So let me close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, you are all of our Father. You are the one that breathed each of us into existence. You formed us in our mother's womb before they knew that we were there. And so for reasons that you only you know, you are the one that gave us our backgrounds and our families and our experiences, and you brought us into a relationship with you. Lord, thank you for bringing us into that relationship with you. Thank you for bridging so many barriers to do that. Religious barriers, racial barriers, male-female barriers, to show us your love and your forgiveness. And Lord, you've taught us that it's up to us to be the ones to help other people know your love and know your forgiveness, and to grow strong in our relationship with you. So Lord, thank you again for Chris and Kelsey and Pastor Leon and the experiences that you have given to them, and to be able to share with us and to encourage us and to exhort us to live our lives for you, and to do the most that we can through the power of your Holy Spirit to make a tremendous difference in our community, and not just in our community, but in our world, Lord. So bless them. Thank you for blessing us, and thank you for tonight. And Lord, I pray that we see something terrific happen as a result of tonight. In your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all.
If anyone wants to step on the chat, you can.
Pastor Leon, there was a question in the chat. Do you guys have a link to your online services?
Yes, we do. And you're asking the most illiterate link guy in the whole world. But we're on Facebook. I think it's something.
This is Grace Christian Center on Facebook. You look it up in the Plains, Athens, and his messages are on there.
Awesome, thank you.
Archive.
Here's my question. I feel like a lot of white people want to do something, want to say something, want to speak up, so that their silence isn't interpreted as condoning racism. But I've just heard from so many people who say, I don't know what to say, and I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing, and I'm afraid of trying to do good and then saying one of the hurtful, dumb things that white people always say. Or what if I'm in a situation where I'm not seeing racism, but I'm seeing the news, and I want to do something? How do you tell people how to say something that is actually appropriate and that actually helps, instead of compounding the problem?
You know, Mindy, when you see something that you don't agree with, and actually women are conditioned to be quiet, and I don't agree with that. Some of the biggest change agents in my life have been women. They also had a switch in their hand, but they were the women. But the fact of the matter is, there are certain things that are said that we endorse as Christians that don't deserve our endorsement. One of the things I already mentioned, and that's the immigrant situation. You know, when we hear about that, what's the immigrant that goes to my church supposed to think? And it's endorsed by the evangelical church. Some of the evangelical people need to wake up and smell the coffee and say, no, that's wrong. That what made this country great, when I was young, we said we were a melting pot. Now that same melting pot is looked at as if it's evil or bad, because it's wrapped in a term called multiculturalism. And so now that's a bad term. And we wrap it up in patriotism. we got to be careful with that, because if we need to say when something's wrong. I refuse to go along with something wrong, when something's not right. I refuse to dance the music I don't like, scratch when I ain't itching. I laugh at stuff that's not funny to me. I'm not gonna do that. That's wrong to me. And so sometimes I think we need to stand up and say, you know, that's wrong. You know, that's not right.